They cannot. We can just as easily say, if you want to put an end to this, put an end to the cause of it. Surely in the end, Britain of all countries, not America, but Britain, has some knowledge of this, because Britain dealt with the IRA. Britain now has Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, a former leader of the IRA, Martin McGuinness. How does that figure? How does that figure? The IRA carried out a campaign in which almost 3,000 people were killed in Britain. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, though I don't, any number is big, so far here in the UK it's been 52. It started at 52 and it's thus far ended at 52 on one day. The IRA campaign lasted 50 years. But in the end, they could come to a solution. Why? The IRA. Not that they love them, but they can reach an agreement, a discussion. With us, they think we are so foreign. We are so alien. One of the terms used to describe us in Guantanamo was enemy, alien. They always describe us as aliens, but they never describe themselves as aliens when they go to our lands. But in fact, they are alien. Everything about them, when they go to Iraq or Afghanistan, it's laughable. When you hear some of these guys trying to speak Arabic or Pashto or Farsi, you want to fall over laughing. Wallahi, brothers, I tell you this. When they took me in the middle of the night in front of my family, and it was frightening, I was terrified. They tied my hands behind my back, put a hood over my head, put me into the back of this car, and there were two CIA agents. One's wearing an Afghani bakul, you know the bakul, right? The hat, the Afghani hat. And they're wearing shalwar qameez. And another one's wearing this thing around his head that he's wrapped. It looks hilarious. Wallahi, brothers, I was on the floor, I was on the back of the seat like this. They pulled up the thing off my head. I was terrified. When I looked at this guy's face, I went, you people, you're alien. When they speak and pretend and they think they can speak our language, it makes you laugh. 10 years they've been there now and they still can't speak the language. Haven't you heard those arguments before? Say it about us here. It's the same. In fact, you'll find that these arguments that they present, when they want to say that we are alien, whether we like it or not, we're more British than we realize. We're more British than we realize. And that's just a fact of our geography, a fact of our qadr, born and raised here. But for them to start describing us as aliens means we don't belong anywhere on this planet. Because all their films about aliens are about things that don't exist on this planet. They have no right. They're invaders. And they constantly describe us as aliens. But when they go to our lands and occupy, and they're hundreds of thousands, and remain for decades on end, and introduce things that those people have never seen before, nor would care to see, it's not alien. It's liberation. So if you bring it back to all of this and start asking, why do these guys do what they do? Why do they do it? Ask every single one of them. Why? Because he hates Britain? He doesn't like the liberties that he gets here? He doesn't like the Queen? He doesn't like 10 Downing Street? He doesn't like BBC's Panorama? What's the reason? It's none of the above. Every single one of them, from Muhammad Siddiq Khan to the ones now, they all say the same thing. Get your troops out of our country, don't occupy, don't kill, don't maim women and children who are innocent. This is the supreme act of terrorism. In fact, if you kill 52 people, I accept that the act is terrorism in this manner in which it was done on July the 7th. But what do you call the sustained, continuous and non-stop wanton killing of hundreds of thousands of people? Terrorism is simply too small, too light a word. It's too light a word. And if we were a community elsewhere, from elsewhere, we would have described it as genocide. We would have described it as genocide. Because that's what you call it. For these guys who have done the bombing in Boston, they have charged them with the use of weapons of mass destruction. It's laughable. Of course there are lives involved in there, and we feel sorry for any innocent people who've been killed. But weapons of mass destruction, it's hilarious. If it wasn't so serious, George Bush, Dick Cheney, Tony Blair, everyone who's involved, Obama himself, involved in the drone strike program in which they're killing people in hundreds every day. And of course, we don't even know the number, we don't count the number because the dead don't count. What do you call that? Convict them. If they committed a crime, the guys, convict them. I'm not against that. But let us have some equal justice. It will never happen. They will never do it. We need to constantly remind them. We need to constantly tell them. Why is our blood and the blood of those children in Afghanistan and Iraq cheaper than yours? Why do they have no value, yet you have so much value? Why do we know the number of exactly to the single digit how many people died on September 11th, 2,976? And yet not one person can reciprocate and say, this is how many people died in Afghanistan on this date, let alone over the past 11 or 12 years. These are questions, my brothers and sisters, that we need to put to them constantly. And remember, MI5 come knocking at the door and start asking you to spy, and start asking you to pry, and start asking you to perform, and start placing pressure upon you. Hold yourself to account by two things. Of course you fear that something may happen to you if you don't cooperate. Everybody does have that hidden feeling. They may have knowledge of one of your relatives who may be illegally in this country. They may have knowledge of something you're doing or you did that you don't want brought out in the open. They may have knowledge, and they're not Muslims, so they don't mind exposing your sins. As Muslims, we try not to expose our sins and to expose the sins of others, because we want Allah to protect us on the Day of Judgment and not expose our sins. So we protect other people's sins and we don't expose them. But if they have that on you, then remember also, you have to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you to do. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا. Do not spy. Do not inform. Do not do those things that the Prophet ﷺ has warned against. Speaking about another brother. أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتَةً فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. Would any one of you wish to eat the flesh of his dead brother? You would hate it. Speaking of another brother. It's either ghiba or it's either namima, which is even worse. Did you know this brother was doing this? And you go around telling tales. Did you know this brother was doing this? And this brother's doing this. And not only are you doing it with Muslims, you're doing it with non-Muslims and making the situation even worse. Be extremely careful about this. It doesn't mean that we don't want to protect this country and other innocent people from acts of violence. Yes, we do. And yes, we will. And we will use our methods that are open to us, inshallah. But spying, my brothers and dear brothers and sisters, spying is something, as I said when I began, it's not something that Britain itself supports. In fact, there are laws against it in terms of people spying against this country. And more importantly than that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like it. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullahu khair, subhanakallah wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Jazakumullah khair. Today's seminar was organized by the Dawah project. And once again, I'd like to thank all the brothers and sisters for attending. We have weekly circles at HCC Masjid every Wednesday after Salatul Maghrib. Brothers are encouraged to attend and invite others. There's a free booklet here by the Quran Project. I strongly encourage all of you to take a free copy. It's on beautifying your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in particular, gaining khushu in salah. It's a free book. If you want to make donation to the Quran Project, please, as I said, it's a voluntary organization that relies on your donations. Please feel free to donate, and the address and email address is on the back. If there's any question that you'd like to ask Brother Moazzam, please feel free. If the sisters have any questions, please write them on a piece of paper and pass them through the curtain. Jazakumullah khair. Any questions?
Moazzam, you said that you don't need to cooperate with MI5, but what we've read in the papers is that they made people's lives very difficult, those who didn't cooperate with it.
The brother's question is that I said that you're not required to cooperate with MI5, and he said, well, there are people who didn't do that, and it's recorded that these people's lives were made very, very difficult. That's true. There's no doubt about this. There's no doubt about this. Now, when we're talking about life being made difficult, one has to weigh up his conscience, and he has to weigh up in the end what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be pleased with. Now, MI5 coming along and placing pressure, and let me tell you, I've been interrogated by MI5 more times than I can remember. And the last time I spoke with MI5, I said, okay, I will speak to you, but you'll have to have your lawyers present, and I will bring my lawyers. And to cut a long story short, I don't say don't speak to them at all, but when they ask you to spy on people in particular, and when they are asking you things that are placing you in a position where you don't know what they're going to use in terms of their information, and they pass that information on to the police, and the police then can come along and arrest you. So you may end up incriminating yourself. So you require legal protection. But be that as it may, you can simply refuse to speak to them. You are not required by law. Now, they will say that if you speak to us, it's in your best interests. Your life may be made difficult, and we've catalogued cases of several people that they've done that with. But as I said, there's no legal obligation. You're not required to do so. And if you do it as a result of you being afraid, they will, as I said to you, then they will put pressure on you. Parents, I know of cases of people whose parents' immigration status was not clear, and they said, well, if you don't cooperate with us, we don't know what will happen. Then you need to bring this information out. You need to let people know what's going on. You need to let people know what's happening. What you shouldn't do is to bow down, because what you're going to do then is here's the question. Is your life and your security more important and more valuable than the life and security of another person? And why and how can you give this choice? That's why I said it's a choice of conscience, of your dhamir. In Arabic you call it the dhamir, your conscience. Do you have the right to place suspicion on somebody else in order to avoid your own? And this is a question, that's why I said that these types of things, when they happen, they need to be noted, they need to be catalogued, and they need to be presented. And when a person feels that he's being harassed, think outside the box. Make a report to the police. Say that MI5 is harassing them. MI5 is doing something that they shouldn't be doing. I've reported the MI5 to the police, and the police have investigated and are investigating. And they're investigating in the case of the Guantanamo prisoners, of the secret renditions, and we turned up to the police and we said, here's a crime that took place, we want you to investigate MI5. So now there is an investigation, a police investigation of MI5. So that keeps them at a distance from us. And these are the things I encourage you to get involved, because you're in the system, you can't work outside.
The ports of entry is always a problematic place. Is there any more rights that the security services have at those places?
The question is, the ports of entry are places where there are more problems. Do they have more laws and rights there to question you? The answer is yes. Under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act, they can and do often. And even when I came back just now from Syria, they detained me for an hour and asked me questions. Now, the questions that they ask you are supposed to be relative to your travel, specific to your travel, that particular journey that you made. Asking about questions about other people, they don't have the right to do that, and you're not required to answer all about them. The parameters of all this, of course, now they have understood, and they give you a lot of documentation and leaflets in order to explain to you under what section of the law you're being stopped, what rights they do have, what they can do if you refuse to answer the questions, can they search you, can they search your baggage and so forth, how long they can hold you for. All of that is part of what they'll explain to you. If you go to the Cage Prisoners website, we have a whole section on it explaining to you how to respond to Schedule 7 stop and searches. But we can also say that we are beginning a project to highlight and to note, record the cases, as many cases as possible, to provide empirical evidence of the effects of Schedule 7, because in all honesty, nobody likes it. Not Muslims, not non-Muslims. And there have been a number of non-Muslims who have been stopped under it, and inshallah we're documenting their cases, and we present them again to the government and say that if they continue with this, then its effects are going to be bad, and people are going to start telling them, say, okay, go ahead, imprison me, I'm not answering your questions.
You're saying that if we are harassed, we should tell the police, or no one trusts the police, and are not the police the same as the MI5? Just a different.
It's a good question. The police are not the same as the MI5. They are all part of the same government. They are all arms of the government. But this is the problem. The police is not the same as the MI5. The MI5 does not have powers of arrest. They do not have powers and they do not have powers to question your appointment. So, reporting the culprit to the culprit, right? That's the question. Reporting, how can you report the MI5 to the police? That's the whole point. I'm not saying they're going to do everything about it. I'm not saying that they're going to be on your side. But the more this happens, the more it becomes a problem for them. The more it happens, the more it's reported in Derby and Birmingham and London and Manchester, it becomes constant. The police will be inundated by reports of MI5 harassment. It doesn't mean, I never said that they're on our side. I never said that these people have our interests at heart. But what I do say is that you have to understand the system in which you're living here. There's one thing you can do is be affected by them. They come along, shake you up a bit, and you don't know what to do. As a result of it, you stop going to the masjid, stop going seeing your friends, becoming very afraid, you become paranoid, you don't talk in the car about even legitimate things, you won't talk on the phone. Its effects are devastating. That's what if you don't do something about it. When you come open about it, speak to cage prisoners. If you don't take it to the police, we will. And like I said to you, in the case of the Guantanamo cases and the rendition, the police started saying, we want to go to Guantanamo to go and speak to the prisoners there. Now, we know the police is the police. But what kind of pressure does that put on the American government that the British government wants to come here, the British police want to come here? Now they're obliged for them to come there. The British police had to go to Libya to go and speak to some rendition brothers who were captured and renditioned. So, as I said to you, brother, these people I accept. You know, don't think when you're talking about the police, you're going to end the case will end up going to the normal bobby on the street. There are institutions within the police who've been tasked to investigate the government and MI5. Whether they do it or whether they don't do it, I don't know. But I know one thing: if it happens simultaneously all over the place, it will make them think more than rather just turning up to you. Wallahu a'lam.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I've got two quick questions. First one is, how are the police and MI5 allowed to get away with such blatant harassment and intimidation of the Muslim community? Especially like you mentioned, right, there are a lot more things happening with the IRA. They killed a lot more people, they destroyed a lot more buildings, they caused a lot more damage, and none of this was happening. You have the new legislation coming in. So how are they allowed to get away with that? And the second question is, what can the Muslim community do? There are some of the practical steps that they can take. You mentioned some, but I say that the Muslim community, they're not united, and I think they rely upon that, and they are intimidated and they're afraid, and they rely upon that, and they just, like I said, stick their heads into the sand. So what are some of the practical steps that we could take?
You know, one of the things that we found in any campaign that we've been doing, for example now, the Guantanamo issue that we've been dealing with over 11 years, now something happened drastically. The brothers went on hunger strike. the media are all interested in. Even the Daily Mail did a really big article on my friend Shakir. So one of the things that happens in this country, things move according to the media. Even the politicians, you know, if you take the case of Abu Qatada, that's one prime example. The man's never been charged with a crime, ever. And every argument and allegation that they put towards him can be easily refuted. Yet his whole discussion is set up in the media. Politicians will regurgitate and, you know, spew out what they've read in the media, not what they've read in this case. They don't know anything about it. So, for better or for worse, that's how this country operates, the media. Sadly, the Daily Mail,